Dungeons and Dragons. They're in the title of the game, so it makes sense dragons evolved as the game has. The latest edition is no exception. So let's talk about Greatwyrms and how you can include the most mighty members of dragonkind into your campaign setting through the lens of the Forgotten Realms, as a great example of them in action. D&D is set in a world where magic is real. It's part of the ecosystem, and dragons are creatures of magic. That is, biology and physics can only get you so far in describing their ecology before things just get weird and mystical. Because they are supernatural, they exist within and are an integral part of a super version of nature. If you remove all the dragons, the world becomes less magical and more mundane, and all the other creatures of magic itself, suffer from that catastrophic loss and disruption, like cutting down all the rainforests or bleaching all the coral reefs. It has long-term and serious consequences. Dragons are different from other biological life in that age doesn't diminish them. They only grow stronger, and up to a certain age category, it's less clear why that is, but there are signs, their elemental breath weapon being a big, bold clue. They are creatures of magic. They grow stronger because magic becomes more and more the sustaining factor in their biology. While they are infamous for sleeping for long periods of time, those long stretches of inactivity are not only resting and conserving physical energy, they are a long, slow transformation into beings who sustain themselves through a vast reservoir of magical energy. In the Forgotten Realms, this energy is represented by the weave. It includes all sorts of natural and supernatural forces and requires a lifetime of study to ever truly comprehend, covering geological, climatic, biological, divine, and conceptual forces and flows in a delicately balanced, incredibly vital and intricate system that mystics and observant geniuses have codified into the art of magical arcana, the various schools of magic, and of course, the many faiths and deities present and active in the world setting. In a nutshell, Greatwyrms are what happens when dragons reach the stage after many centuries, when they finally transform into living conduits and anchors for the weave itself. They become incredibly powerful creatures akin to demigods. Their influence shapes the weave around them, like mountains shape the weather, like moons shape the tide. Settle back, grab yourself a tasty beverage. It's time to get deeply nerdy. With the latest edition of the game, the Greatwyrms are now split into 3 types, which are found in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. I think they are worthy of at least a sidebar in the core monster manual, so let's get into it. Central to the transformation from ancient dragons into Greatwyrms is the existence of many worlds and alternate and conceptual planes of existence. This is tied into magic much deeper than just jumping through magic planar portals and summoning otherworldly creatures in magical ritual circles. When a mage casts a spell, they commonly require a physical component. Specific words and gestures or movements are also part of it. In early D&D, even creating a magic item likely required materials from other planes of existence, other worlds and realms with different variations on laws of physics. Magic items needed to be weird. They needed to bypass the limitations of the world they were on, and that's how they did it. Components may seem a bit humorous, and they're intended that way, but the theory underlying them is called sympathetic magic, something equivalent, in a similar form or vibration to what is being invoked, like a voodoo doll or tuning a guitar exactly the same as another. You push a pin in one, the other feels it. You strum the strings on one, the other vibrates and makes a sound as well. It's essentially how radios work. The antenna is tuned to the right length to catch the vibration of the radio wave, its frequency. For dragons, other planes have other dragons who are so similar to themselves, due to their innate attunement to magic, that they can form these connections. But the 3 different types of Greatwyrms not only represent the 3 main types of true dragons found on the continent of Faerun, the gem, metallic, and chromatic dragons, they also represent 3 different methods of exploiting these attunements across many worlds. to become beings of incredible magical power. There are many types of true dragons found on the world of Toril, though, and I will be talking about them later on in the video, so stick around if you want some ideas for fairy dragon greatwyrms, greatwyrm dragon turtles, lung dragons and linorms, to name a few. Oh yeah, we're going there, man. You know me, I don't mess around. I know what you're here for. This video was sponsored by a supporter on Fourthwall, and I aim to exceed all their expectations because I seriously appreciate them. Starting with the oldest true dragons represented in Fizbans, the Chromatics, the best way to look at their attitude towards this metamorphosis by way of a metaphor is Jet Li starring in the movie called The One. The film, which deals with the concept of multiverse and interdimensional travel, follows a rogue agent who travels to parallel realities in order to kill other versions of himself to become a mythical super being known as the One, essentially taking their power until it's all concentrated within himself. That's exactly what chromatic ancient dragons will be occupying themselves with. They don't have a choice in the matter, because across all the different realms and planes in the multiverse, other versions of themselves will be trying to do it, and they have to defend themselves at least, if not actively try to do it to them as well. It is, as you would expect, with dragons of chaos and evil, a brutal, messy, and disorderly process of violent elimination until only one remains, the Greatwyrm. Chromatic Greatwyrms should always be quite different from each other in the details and method they achieve this by, and that is reflected in the few examples we have with known chromatic Greatwyrms in the lore. However, Fizbans identifies a number of the dragon gods as being Greatwyrms, so for the true dragons, this is their path to immortality and godhood. Chromatic dragons focus on the primordial power of the elements and raw arcane destructive energy. They are churning with the energy of their breath weapon and can release a 60-foot flare of elemental energy if pushed to their physical limits and forced to seemingly regenerate themselves instantly, channeling a huge amount of elemental power to restore their body. This awesome power is called a chromatic awakening. In effect, even if you do get them down to 0 hit points, they just pop a Senzu bean and instantly restore themselves to full hit points, recharge their breath weapon, and reset all of the uses of their legendary resistance. Oh, and unlock their special mythic actions for the next hour. It's Gygaxian levels of brutal unfairness and will absolutely murder any unprepared and unaware would-be dragon slayers, as the massive monster they're about to celebrate murdering suddenly springs back up and blasts them with a 300-foot cone of destructive breath energy that does between 12 and 144 points of damage with a dexterity save difficulty of 26. That was the warm-up, and now the fight gets serious. Best of luck. Chromatic Greatwyrms have spent centuries hunting rivals through the realms. They are highly perceptive, very stealthy, and extremely intimidating. Oh, they can also create 4 spears of magical force, much like magic missiles that strike multiple targets, or all 4 can be concentrated on one spot, automatically striking and damaging their target. With 120-foot true sight and coincidentally 120-foot range on their arcane spears, good luck running for cover or relying on magic to keep you hidden. Although the stat block says they can make 1 bite and 2 claw attacks, their claw attacks automatically grapple the target of less than huge size and restrain it, so of course they're going to pin victims like a gargantuan cat pins its prey before they casually chomp them in half. The extra force damage is just that, brutally crushing jaw power. Talking of concentration on one spot, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons says this about the chromatic Greatwyrm. They no longer need to eat or drink, as their vast hordes magically sustain them. And in Chapter 4 he says, hordes are extensions of dragons' inherently magical nature, resonators that focus their magic and link them to the magic of the material plane. Also, you can add regional effects and even layer actions to young dragons, particularly for dragons who have acquired an unusually large horde. Further, as dragons age and amass larger hordes, they tend to establish multiple lairs. This serves partially to mitigate risk. There's less chance of a dragon losing an entire horde in a single burglary if that horde is spread across multiple locations, and partly to extend the dragon's magical influence across a growing territory. The treasure cache stored in each lair anchors the dragon's power there even when the dragon isn't present, extending the reach of regional effects. And finally, a dragon dividing a horde often apportions one or more pieces from a linked set of objects to each treasure cache. The implications of this from an ecological world-building point of view are astounding. It implies very strongly that dragons will seek out sets of magic items, potent ones, if they can find them, and spreading them out, linked through their magic, is pretty much like spreading out Wi-Fi routers to boost their signal, allowing them much greater awareness and control in their territory, but effectively expands their deep connection to the magical flow of the weave over a much wider range. The regional effects manifesting over a large area around the dragon's lair is just the tip of the iceberg. What the dragons are doing is shaping and directing the flow of magic, filtering it, changing it, and in some cases, enhancing and restoring it. If you kill the dragon, you could cause a dramatic, perhaps even catastrophic shockwave of disruption to all magic across the entire territory, stretching out for miles, depending on the size of their hordes and the number of additional lairs wherever they may be located. Because the horde changes the flow of magic, it can leave lingering local effects even after it is removed, as the weave doesn't instantly shift. It's not a river being redirected by a dam, after all. Alongside lingering effects such as unusual weather and outrageous plant growth, there may also be new dead magic zones and wide-scale death of plants and animals. Let's not forget that creatures of magic now suddenly migrating and looking for new homes. There's a good reason the local folklore and customs so strongly urge people to leave dragons alone if at all possible. It's also clearly an excellent tactic for crippling a dragon's legendary abilities. By plundering a small lair, drawing the dragon out to protect its vital asset, you can raid the larger lair, dispersing the horde and making an inevitable violent confrontation slightly less lethal for yourselves. Maybe. This poses some very tricky questions for those who practice the arcane arts and those who, quite logically, would seek out dragons as literal sources of power, warlocks and cultists, and supernatural beings of magic, but more on that later. One last note, specific to chromatic dragons. The goddess of them all is ostensibly Tiamat, who is restrained from leaving the Nine Hells by Asmodeus, on the plane of Avernus where her mountain-sized lair is located. She is surrounded by and served by a huge number of Abyshai. Tiamat had originally made the Abyshai with the help of Pirza, one of the Dark Eight pit fiends. Abyshai look more like classic winged gargoyles split up into the primary chromatic types and have a bit of a superiority complex where they respond to the scorn and bias against them from the other devils by acting like they are actually superior to all other devils, even when Tiamat essentially sells them out like cannon fodder legions to other lords of the Nine Hells. Those turned from Spinagons into low-ranking Abyshai were generally viewed as too lazy or incompetent to rise to a higher status among the rest of the devils, but it is possible for them to be promoted among the general population ranks like the Barbazu, the Kokrachon, the Chiton, or even the Erinyes, if they really distinguish themselves in the infernal hierarchy. Abyshai are fanatically loyal to Tiamat while in the Nine Hells, but there is lore which informs us that when free of Tiamat's attention, they prefer to exist without the constant threat of her wrath. Many of the souls they are spawned from are former cultists of the chromatic dragon goddess. However, they are still devils, so at any time, Asmodeus can just Order 66 them, override any of Tiamat's orders, and turn her most trusted minions against her, or use them for his own purposes. This is particularly important when it comes to ancient chromatic dragons who deal with any dragon cults or dragon spawn, as Abyshais willingly cooperate with the dragon spawn of mortal planes, often taking positions of great influence among them. Since ancient dragons seek any access and advantage they can find in the game of dominating and consuming the power of their echoes across the planes and mortal realms, they inevitably become pawns in the machinations of Tiamat, the Nine Hells, Asmodeus, the Blood War, and the mercenary influence of those planar manipulators, the Yugoloths. So, one of the creatures of magic who 100% should be more commonly found near or within the territory of ancient chromatic dragons or greatwyrms are night hags. This, my friends, is how you connect the dots and build a logically cohesive world of magic. Granted, it will tend to look a lot like a conspiracy wall with monster stat sheets connected by red string, and your friends and family may get worried about you. Next, we have the metallic greatwyrms. Unlike the chromatics, they are often granted their status by the god Bahamut. But any of the dragon gods can help them along this path, providing guidance and access, top divine conduits through the astral plane. This is done by profound agreement with their echoes across the multiverse, who merge their consciousness and magic together. Those sufficiently attuned to magic will transform purely into magic in this process and combine into a new, much more powerful form. To give you some idea, in earlier editions they were a bit more specific about the size of creatures, and greatwyrms are around 30 meters or more. That's 100 feet on the small end of the spectrum, with many much larger. Conflicts with metallic greatwyrms will resolve through use of their epic powers of persuasion and negotiation rather than brute force. They're normally good aligned beings, otherwise they wouldn't have merged in such a way willingly in the first place. It's only when they feel compelled to put a stop to truly evil and destructive creatures, such as Dracoliches, that they unleash their full and terrifying power. Otherwise, they form great domains of peaceful, calm, nurturing and sustaining magic-rich environments, locating themselves at the best positions to keep the worlds they choose as their homes safe, stable, and interesting, as their awareness and intelligence is vast and always hungry for entertainment. Fizban discusses this. Almost every kind of dragon can develop their awareness of all their incarnations across many worlds of the prime material plane. Once they come into possession of magic artifacts from or with components from other worlds, or with history tied to that of other worlds, they can access their incarnation there far more easily. This power to communicate and coordinate across worlds gives them a near godly status among members of younger races, and all young dragons aspire to this awesome ability. Their hunger for magic items, largely interpreted as mere avarice and greed by mortal beings, it paints the particular interest of many dragons in the history and artifacts of humanoid races in a whole new light. Metallic greatwyrms retain the ability to change their shape into that of another creature, though in the latest edition of D&D it says this is restricted to medium or small creatures. I can't for the life of me think why, though. Anyone would not immediately ignore that. So now, sustained through magic alone, the greatwyrm is finally free to remain another form for as long as it wants, wandering a huge territory that directs power into them, aware of the environment, the movements of living creatures, the politics of cultures, the presence of other creatures of magic, the machinations of otherworldly factions. It's no wonder that many of the dragon gods are greatwyrms. They're damn near unbeatable, because the fight is not over before it begins. They just navigate around it, cut it off before it begins, or negotiate a non-violent outcome. They're extremely intelligent. They're very unlikely to ever be caught completely unprepared or unaware of anything the players are going to try and throw at them. They are always a few steps ahead, not just because they run at a sprint, but because they have many more legs than you do, metaphorically speaking. Humanoid intelligence is childlike to them, often entertaining in a sort of cute and tragic way, not a very challenging or threatening way. Metallic greatwyrms have two breath weapons. The chromatic greatwyrms can unleash a massive cone-shaped blast of elemental energy specific to what breed they once were, or they can create a knockout gas over the same range, which can render a living being unconscious for up to a minute. When they do their special "haha, you thought I was dead" trick, they get really angry and can unleash a shattering roar, which suffers the usual issue of designers wedging descriptive text into a game mechanic copy-pasted over 3 versions of the same monster. In this case, they swapped the burst of energy part of the Awakening regeneration and put that where the Arcane Spears bit is for the metallic Greatwyrm, because they gave the dragon 2 breath weapon types, which I guess they didn't understand doesn't really matter because it doesn't use them at the same time. This is what playtesting and experience at the game table is for. So as a result, Shattering Roar has a 120-foot range but does a lot more damage, and in a blindingly stupid line says, each creature in a 120-foot radius sphere centered on the Greatwyrm must succeed on a DC 26 Constitution saving throw or take 3 to 36 points of thunder damage and be incapacitated until the end of its next turn. This makes no sense at all. It's the same effect as the Shatter spell, obviously. They could have saved a lot of space just saying, this is a 6th level Shatter spell with a radius of 120 feet and a save DC of 26. Any target that fails the save is also incapacitated until the start of the next turn. Easy, correct, simple, and it damages non-magical objects not being worn, and it does half as much damage on a failed save, and constructs save with disadvantage, which is logical. The Shattering Roar is written in Fizzbands. It's not logical and should be adjusted. Next, we have the Gem Greatwyrms, and I'll just quote Fizzbands here. More so even than their chromatic and metallic kin, Gem Dragons are fascinated with cultivating their dragon sight and fusing the awareness of the echoes across the material plane. Some of them believe that by doing so, they are taking steps towards reuniting the shattered consciousness of Sardior the Ruby Dragon, their liege. They pursue this awakening as an act of near-religious devotion. Others seek to exploit their knowledge of the many worlds of the material plane as a source of power. And indeed, a gem dragon who becomes a Greatwyrm has access to almost unimaginable power. Gem Greatwyrms' ascension transforms their bodies to appear as crystal, their scales sparkling like diamonds. Their breath weapons become powerful waves of crushing force that can stop almost any creature in its tracks. But the Greatwyrm's most powerful ability is telekinesis on an unparalleled scale. A gem Greatwyrm can telekinetically seize an entire crowd and then carry those helpless folk off to the dragon's lair. Why it would do that, I don't know, but in theory, it could. The Gem Greatwyrms also have psychic powers which they list as spellcasting. This is a sad fact in the current edition that psionics is just treated the same way as arcane spells, resulting in Gem Greatwyrms having spellcasting included when in reality ancient dragons with innate magical power and astonishing intelligence should all have spellcasting included. Again, game designers being stupid. Please correct this at your gaming table. The new magic action type in 2024 edition is a good mechanic though. That works quite well, credit where it's due. If a spell has a casting time of 1 minute or more yet is listed in a spellcasting action, the monster doesn't cast the spell in just one action unless the action's description states otherwise. The monster must make the magic action on each of its turns and maintain concentration to cast the spell. Simple, good way of handling it. Bit wordy, but good. Gem Dragons not only have the same ability as the metallics to shape change, they can also teleport 60 feet using their psychic power. They're basically living tractor beam emitters who exhale a 300-foot cone of crushing force. Additionally, 90-foot long and 10-foot wide beams of brain-scrambling psychic energy when really angry, and they can target any number of creatures or objects not being carried or worn, each under 2 tons in weight, within their true sight range of 120 feet, and restrain them with telekinesis. Then, at the end of the Greatwyrm's turn, it can move any telekinetically grabbed creature or object up to 60 feet. That's sprinting speed for a human, in any direction, as long as it's not beyond 120 feet of the dragon. It can also choose to crush with force damage while doing so, and their only hope is making a DC 26 strength saving throw. How they do this in midair against telekinesis, your guess is as good as mine. And to save time, I suggest that damage also represents the creature or object being slammed into the ground, or creatures who did manage to make that saving throw, so the Gem Dragon can beat a small army of soldiers to death with their fellow soldiers, or just pick up a ridiculous number of 2-ton boulders and pulverize anything it has not already pulverized. Oh, and unlike the other two Greatwyrm types, their gems can never be knocked prone, though their Senzu Bean instant recovery feature only lets them recover 400 hit points, so I guess it's not as good. Gem Greatwyrms have an intelligence as high as intelligent gets in D&D. It's godlike, and unlike the metallic Greatwyrms, gems are far less interested in the petty goings-on of mortal creatures and humanoids. Adventurers are like insects to them, pests to be swept out of the way if it's venturing into areas infested with their little villages, towns, and city hives. My advice for when you see a great gem Greatwyrm is just to get out of the area immediately. They are way out of the league of mortals to deal with. Other kinds of true dragons exist, and although it's rare for them to become Greatwyrms, there's no reason why they can't. So, let's talk about them. You can find the main lore of the fairest dragons in Dragon Magazine issues 170 and 356. I can't discuss Greatwyrms without mentioning the ultimate ruler of the diverse and constantly feuding kind, the supreme dragon Groglothor. Unique among the Greatwyrms and another fine example of how different they can be from each other. I'll quote directly from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons wiki page on this lore since it's got all the info on him. Groglothor is not a divine power, but he is effectively immortal, as whenever he dies, an iron dragon is chosen to replace him. In a secretive ritual, the dragon hibernates for a year and emerges dramatically transformed into Groglothor. His full size from snout to the tip of his tail is 325 feet, or about 99 meters long. He is vastly intelligent and uses his spells and abilities in preference to physical attacks. He has 3 forms of breath weapon: a sleep gas similar to the metallic Greatwyrm, a cone of superheated sparks, or he can fire a bolt of solid stone, 30 feet long and 5 feet wide, out of his mouth. He has the ability to pass through solid stone, shape it, and enough spell knowledge and capability to do pretty much anything else he chooses. Groglothor dwells in a cavern far below one of the highest peaks in the world. From there he rules over all of the fairest dragons, settling all disputes that cannot be handled by other dragon leaders, dispensing justice to those who cannot obey clan laws, and mating with his concubines in order to produce his eventual successor. He likes to snack on iron ore and the flesh of red dragons, who he vehemently hates and has vowed to exterminate down to the last egg. The fairest dragons all share similar abilities and appear in scale, colors, and patterns similar to the various fairest metals. The vast majority of fairest dragons used to be the main type of dragon, but a period known as the Iron Wars saw most of them wiped out, and whole types of them were wiped out completely, leaving only the chromium, cobalt, iron, nickel, and tungsten fairest dragon types remaining. And quoting directly from the Forgotten Realms wiki, a very high majority of fairest dragons were lawful and followed a hierarchy among their species created by Groglothor, where the most powerful dragon species had more importance and superiority than others below them. From highest to lowest, they were iron, chromium, cobalt, tungsten, and nickel. Fairest dragons also had families. A few families could come together to join a clan led by the most powerful member. All of the clans of the fairest dragon species were led by a Greatwyrm, who reported directly to Groglothor. Given that they were forbidden from getting into direct physical confrontations with each other, I believe the great dragon game of Zorbenthal was developed within the fairest dragon culture. But that's just my logic. It's not directly written in any canon lore as far as I know. You can learn all about Zorbenthal in my comprehensive video on the topic. Just follow the link that popped up. The fairest dragons all view metallic dragons in different ways. The evil dragons saw metallics as abominations that they had to destroy. Neutral fairest dragons felt indifferent about metallic dragons and simply accepted their existence. Good aligned fairest dragons saw metallic dragons as the purest form of metal. Despite these views, all fairest dragons reviled chromatic dragons. Gem dragons and fairest dragons were generally good with each other and got along well, especially with amethyst and emerald dragons. So make of that what you will in your own games if you like. It's a good framework for draconic politics and may be reflected in the cultural views of Dragonborn. The situation on the world of Toril has drastically changed, but its sister world of Abyss is a lot closer to what Toril once was when it was ruled by dragonkind tens of thousands of years ago. The catastrophic loss of fairest dragon breeds occurred much earlier, before humanoids were around in such diversity and numbers. Fairy dragons are most interesting. They are closer in origin to pseudo-dragons, so the artwork in the monster manual has clearly had their arms amputated, the poor derpy-looking little things, but are intelligent and can speak. Their connection to the Feywild can create, in rare circumstances, a Fey echo that forms out of stories, folklore, legends, and myths. This is due to their habit of helping those who are in danger or distress by leading others to rescue them. There could be a very good reason for that. As they gain a reputation, their own legends and stories grow. In the Feywild, an echo of them becomes more and more real. They are connected and aware of this in much the same way Dragonsight works for true dragons. In time, this may become powerful enough for the adult fairy dragon to become larger, more intelligent, and something of an anchor and protector of the other Fey creatures they associate with, and perhaps even merge with their legendary echo in the Feywild to become a fairy Greatwyrm. If this inspires you to create this sort of thing in your campaign, great! It's just a concept, not canon. The cousins of fairy dragons, the pseudo-dragons, are, in my opinion, highly unlikely to have anything like a Greatwyrm type. But that's just my table. If you come up with one, let me know in the comments. Dragon turtles are not actually true dragons either. They don't become Greatwyrms. The Zaratan, those island-sized turtles that got mangled into being Earth Elementals in 5th edition in 2014, are gargantuan turtle species specific to the waters off the continent of Zakara on the world of Toril, and are totally unrelated to dragons or dragon turtles. And no, I don't think dragon turtles are the result of dragons breeding with giant turtles. I think it's safe to say it was either a god, the Aboleth, or Sarek, or even an elven wizard. Probably a sea elf. Maybe a storm giant. Who knows? Always blame gods and wizards, demons and devils, hags, or the far realm. That's my advice. Other true dragons have their own routes to immortality and godlike status. Lenorms are treated as a distinct draconic family, ancient, wingless, usually venomous, always extremely nasty brutes. They have age categories and several write-ups. I'm inclined to think they just end up eventually in the outer heroic planes, the Beastlands, Isgard, and the wilder side of Bytopia. They may even end up in Avernus, transported there for the training of the legions of Hell, who are known to import titanic monsters for seriously dangerous wargames. They could be recruited by Tiamat for the creation of her dragon spawn, or even be transported to the other planes of conflict, showing up suddenly in the middle of a massive battle on one of the blood-soaked battle cubes of Acheron. If they survive, they do tend to survive, they can become unique planar dragons of epic proportions, like the Norse myths they were originally inspired from. Planar dragons come in a wide variety. There are the adamantine dragons of Bytopia, the arboreal dragons, the astral dragons, the axial dragons of Mechanus, the battle dragons of Erzgard, the beast dragons, the blight dragons of the Shadowfell and other border regions of the negative energy plane, the chaos dragons of Limbo, ethereal dragons, the hellfire worms of the Nine Hells, the howling dragons of Pandemonium, the mirage dragons from 4th edition, which may or may not be real, the Oceanus dragons roaming the upper planes, the Styx dragons roaming the lower planes, the pyroclastic dragons of Gehenna, the radiant dragons of Celestia, the rust dragons of Acheron, and the Tartarian dragons of Carcerai. How common they are depends entirely on the nature of those environments they live in. For example, there may be millions of adamantine dragons in Bytopia because it seems to go on in every direction, while ethereal dragons may have infinite real estate, but precious little to sustain actual living things in the vast misty nothingness. Do any of them spawn Greatwyrms? Probably. There's nothing official written about it, so draw from them for inspiration and have at it at your gaming table. Nobody can stop you or your imagination. The dragons of Karatur have their own celestial roles, and ascension for them largely would involve performing their roles in their respective elements and environments, gaining favour with the celestial court. I'm no expert in celestial bureaucracy or Asian mythology and folklore, but there is a wealth of literature online to study for inspiration. In my personal experience, Asian folks don't get bent out of shape when people borrow from their mythology for the purpose of games and entertainment. They're good like that. If in doubt, have a conversation and learn something. That's my advice. Or read some old books. They don't bite. Not on this planet anyway. Before we start looking at how this impacts player characters and can inspire special adaptations of existing subclasses, let's go over the influence that Greatwyrm dragons have on a magical fantasy world like the Forgotten Realms. A Greatwyrm is no longer in an ecosystem. It is an ecosystem keystone, around which multiple biological, magical, planar, and even narrative systems stabilize. They are key factors in the politics, movement, and machinations of almost all true dragons, and every creature of magic relies on them to keep the fantasy world sufficiently magical to sustain them. Remove the Greatwyrm, and you don't just get the region changes, you get trophic collapse, which devastates the entire connected web of the magical ecosystem. Wild magic cascades, planar leakage, monster speciation failure, weather derangement, and horde-anchored enchantments unraveling simultaneously. The Greatwyrm's treasure hoard is a mineral deposit, a magical battery, a cultural memory vault, planar nexus, and a stupendous source of wealth. The lair and its hoard is a unique adventure environment and even has its own ecosystem with creatures evolved and highly specialized to thrive in it. For the players at the table, taking out a Greatwyrm, if they try and actually manage to do it, should be a big deal. Ley lines knot around Greatwyrms because their bodies draw in and regulate arcane pressure. Elemental boundaries soften because their presence buffers energy gradients. Outer planar influence bleeds through because their mythic mass bends metaphysical membranes. This is why red dragons tend to create weak spots in deep volcanic dungeon layers where fiends can suddenly appear. A Greatwyrm is the thing that makes a fantasy world's magical geography habitable. Kill one, and you don't just loot a dragon and harvest magical components from its massive corpse. You trigger a mass extinction event for all the creatures of magic that relied on its presence, with political, planar, biological, and divine aftershocks that spread far and wide, altering the campaign world. Wild magic storms, new areas of dead magic, disruptions to the unique energy system in the Underdark, disastrous weather events, displaced species that feed on magic like the Disenchanters, sudden open warfare as kobolds migrate and goblins loot magical artifacts, economies in turmoil as the massive wealth of treasure disrupts the balance of trade and scarcity, even down to something as subtle as a player character not being able to find any skilled blacksmiths to fix their gear because they all moved to a suddenly rich province, which are now paying ridiculous sums to skilled armorers so they can upgrade the army for defense or invasion. New constructions of keeps, forts, towers, castles, and cathedrals, it's all interconnected. Now that we've established what Greatwyrms actually are in a functioning magical world, not just oversized stat blocks, but living keystones in the ecology of magic itself, you can finally start looking at what this means for player characters. Because the moment Greatwyrms are treated this way, they stop being monsters you eventually fight and become structural features of the setting that characters inevitably orbit, collide with, exploit, serve, regulate, or are warped by. Sorcerers already have a subclass for that, so let's start with the most obvious and most abused connection in modern D&D, warlocks. If Greatwyrms are living anchors of the weave, then a pact with one of them is not the same thing as a pact with a fiend, a fey noble, or some distant, inscrutable thing from the beyond the stars. The Greatwyrm does not grant power, a Greatwyrm delegates it. It allows a mortal creature to plug themselves directly into one of the regulating systems of the magical world. A warlock bound to a Greatwyrm is not just being drip-fed spells, they're being used as a mobile valve, a roaming sensor, a territorial agent, a parasite, a symbiote, or an immune response. A chromatic Greatwyrm patron can empower cultists, warlocks, and dragonspawn because it needs vectors. It cannot be everywhere at once, even with echoes across worlds, and so it needs pieces of its influence into creatures capable of moving through societies, ruins, and political structures. Those warlocks are not servants in the traditional sense, they are extensions of its metabolism. They destabilize rival hordes, sabotage arcane infrastructure, retrieve resonant artifacts, assassinate dangerous spellcasters, disrupt temples, seed fear, provoke wars, and generally keep the magical environment in a state that favors their patrons' continued dominance. Their spells should feel less like incantations and more like pressure releases, forceful intrusions of draconic reality into spaces that never meant to contain it. Metallic Greatwyrm warlocks are something else entirely. They're not cultists, they are wardens, negotiators, observers, and corrective instruments. A metallic Greatwyrm does not empower mortals because it wants worship, it empowers them because mortal societies are chaotic, inventive, dangerously fast. They build, breed, experiment, summon, dig, and industrialize magic at a pace dragons simply do not. Metallic Greatwyrm warlocks are the distributed nervous system of its territory. They're how it feels distant disturbances, how it inserts subtle pressure into political conflicts, how it neutralizes arcane catastrophes before they mature, how it steers civilizations away from magical behaviors that would destabilize the region. They are not granted power because they are faithful, they are empowered because they are useful interfaces between draconic-scaled systems and humanoid-scale problems. Gem Greatwyrms warlocks are the most unsettling of the three because gem dragons are not interested in stewardship, conquest, or even the petty affairs of mortals. They are interested in awareness, in perception, in the structure of reality itself. A pact with a gem Greatwyrm is not a bargain, it's an experiment. These warlocks become sensory filaments, probability probes, cognition mirrors. Their magic leans towards telekinesis, perception, spatial distortion, psychic phenomena, dream intrusion, and the manipulation of information rather than matter. They're not sent to conquer or protect. They are sent to observe, to destabilize assumptions, to harvest experiences, to locate anomalies in the structure of the world. If chromatic warlocks are blood cells and metallic warlocks are antibodies, gem warlocks are electrodes pushed into the nervous tissue of the multiverse. The switch turned on just for fun. Druids sit in a very different relationship with Greatwyrms. A druidic circle tied to a Greatwyrm does not worship them, bargain with them, or seek to become them. Druids study what happens to nature when magic is not an external force but a stable ecological input. Greatwyrms are not outside the natural order in a magical world. They are what the natural order becomes once magic is abundant, persistent, and biologically integrated. A Greatwyrm-centered druid is not a dragon druid, they're an ecologist of magical succession. These druids understand that forests around metallic Greatwyrms do not merely grow larger, they grow differently. That volcanic regions dominated by chromatic Greatwyrms do not simply become more dangerous, they develop entirely new food webs, new mineral cycles, new species interactions. That territories shaped by gem Greatwyrms produce life forms that respond to thought, emotion, and perception as much as to climate and terrain. Their wild shape does not need to trend towards dragons to be thematically coherent. You don't have to be all dragon obsessive. It should trend towards the kind of organisms that only exist in Greatwyrm territories, creatures that metabolize magic, that feed on enchantment, that reproduce in response to planar tides, that migrate along ley-line currents instead of rivers. A Greatwyrm circle druid is someone who manages imbalance. They intervene when a dragon's presence becomes too dominant or when its absence begins to unravel an entire region. They might be tasked with rewilding dead magic zones, escorting displaced magical species, cultivating new horde ecosystems, or even overseeing the emergence of a successor organism when the Greatwyrm is dying. To them, a dragon's death is not a triumph or a tragedy, it's a mass extinction event that must be managed. Rangers, by contrast, are not managers, they are field operatives. A ranger whose focus is Greatwyrms is not a dragon hunter in the romantic sense, they're a catastrophe tracker. They study migration patterns of creatures that only exist in draconic territories. They learn to read shifts in magic the way other rangers read broken branches and disturbed soil. They recognize the signs of an emergent lair decades before a dragon even claims it. They know which valleys will become uninhabitable when a Greatwyrm stirs. They know what kinds of monsters appear when hordes reach a critical mass. They know how planar bleed expresses itself in weather, animal behavior, and dream patterns. Such rangers might spend their lives never seeing a Greatwyrm directly, but constantly dealing with its consequences, clearing settlements out of zones that are about to become magically toxic, hunting creatures that have escaped from lair ecologies, escorting scholars into regions where the laws of nature are no longer stable, tracking down cult activity not because cults are evil, but because they are often the first visible symptom of a deeper draconic disturbance. Dragon Slayers are where all of this comes to a head. If Greatwyrms are ecosystem keystones, then a Dragon Slayer is not a hero, they're an extinction-level weapon. Historically, in the realms, organized dragon-slaying orders don't arise because dragons are dangerous. They arise because dragons interfere with civilizations, divine plans, or other large-scale power structures. A serious dragon slayer tradition would not be built around martial prowess alone. It would require druids, wizards, clerics, engineers, economists, and planar scholars. Their real work is not killing the dragon. It would be preparing the world to survive the consequences. Alchemists and magic item hunters operate further down the food chain. If hordes are resonators, then every coin, crown, blade, idol, and gemstone that has sat in a Greatwyrm's lair for centuries is not merely enchanted, it's conditioned. It's absorbed ambient magic, narrative weight, elemental influence, and planar harmonics. These objects become the raw materials of high arcana, dragonbone reagents, horde-soaked metals, crystallized lair growths, fossilized spells phenomena. An alchemist who understands Greatwyrms is not looking for treasure, they're harvesting ecological samples, and of course that attunement to the outer planes that they may not have access to by going to other planes themselves. This is also where you get potions that only function in certain regions, blades that destabilize ley lines, armor that disrupts lair effects, components that can substitute for planar travel, substances that could seed artificial magical environments. Greatwyrm territories are not dangerous. They're the equivalent of radioactive zones, coral reefs, deep sea vents, and old-growth forests all stacked on top of each other. And adventurers who plunder them without understanding what they're removing are not brave, they're reckless. Planar adventurers inevitably collide with Greatwyrms because Greatwyrms are where planes touch. They're not just native to environments, they deform them. The astral folds differently around them, elemental boundaries blur, the ethereal thickens, the outer planes find easier purchase. A planar traveler learns that the safest way to move between worlds is often to move through a draconic territory because those regions are already structurally adapted to sustaining impossible energies. This also means planar politics and dragon politics are inseparable. Devils cultivate chromatic territories because they weaken planar membranes. Celestials favor metallic Greatwyrms because they stabilize them. Yugoloths exploit hordes because they concentrate portable metaphysical value. Hags love Greatwyrm regions because stories, souls, curses, and memories all ferment faster there in those dramatic areas. Next up on the channel, I'll be talking about the challenge of explaining the intelligence attribute. How exactly do you represent an intelligence of 21 or 30 in the game? What's the difference between animal intelligence and sapience? What are the types of animal intellects and how do they behave if they become sapient? How does awakened intelligence work? All of this and more in a complete guide for your information and inspiration. Thank you so much for your attention and time. It would be so kind if you were to share this video with a friend, give it a little thumbs up, and contribute your thoughts and anecdotes in the comments below. That would be lovely. My name is AJ Pickett. Thanks for listening, and as always, I'll be back with more for you very soon.